Hi, this is Charles Hoskinson broadcasting live from warm, sunny Colorado. Always warm, always sunny, sometimes Colorado. So today is November 18th, 2021. And it's been a long day, a lot of meetings today. Good news on all the fronts. The engineers are doing their job, business people doing their job. And it's just yet another one of the days of work. Next week is Thanksgiving. And I've just been kind of looking at a lot of my reports, and I have all kinds of notes and other things I've taken. But we look at a lot of sentiment scoring and sentiment analysis. And lately, I've seen unusually high amount of people that are obsessed with things like price. Or they say stuff like, "Oh, well, everything's failing, the sky is falling," and there just seems to be an utter lack of perspective in this space. So from time to time, I do make videos. Last year, I made one right after the markets completely collapsed because of COVID, and everything was down like 30%, 40% in a day, and there was blood in the streets, and people got so worried. And there was a call to fundamentals in that presentation, in that speech. And I basically said to people, calm down, chill out. It's okay. You see, cryptocurrencies are a very unique moment in human history. And I think it's really important, especially for new people who have kind of fair weathered their way into the industry, to understand what that moment is, because perspective has been lost. And as a consequence, calm is no longer there. It wasn't too long ago that there was this era of calm monetary policy, stable and persistent inflation, about 2-3% per year. Deficits weren't too bad. National debt wasn't too unmanageable. GDP growth was looking pretty good. Things were stable. But underlying all of that was this idea that there was nothing constraining the excesses of government. And there was an incestuous, and still is, incestuous relationship between government and corporations all across the world. And what's happened since the year 2000 to 2021 is we have seen an astronomical increase in the amount of money in circulation, justified by Keynesian economics and modern monetary theory, to the point where in the United States in particular, half of all the money in circulation has been printed in the last 2 years. We are passing bills in the US, like the infrastructure bill and probably the Build Back Better program, that cost more money than all of the money spent by every US president from George Washington to George H.W. Bush combined in one fiscal year. A personal example, anecdotal example, my ranch up in Wyoming, I bought a bunch of propane fuel tanks for about $25,000 each. Big, big fuel tanks. Company sold them to me 5 months later. We were having trouble getting labor to bury them. Company that sold them to me reached out to me and said, "Hey, we'd like to buy some of those tanks back from you to resell them. We'll pay you $35,000. 5 months, price went up 10,000. That's the wholesale. Everything's up. Timber's up. Steel's up. There's real inflation, probably over 20% this year. The supply chains are so screwed up that I saw the other day the spot price of West Texas Intermediate oil negative $37. You had to pay people to take it. Some people in California on the other side of the supply chain are paying over $6 a gallon for gasoline, all-time high. On one side of the supply chain, you have to give it away. On the other side of the supply chain, it's at an all-time high. These are not functioning markets. There's a lot of problems here. And some people say these are transitory, or some people say these are structural. You see things like the Great Reset be pushed upon us. You'll own nothing and be happy. Things like capitalism has failed. It's time for a new system. And usually it's some sort of massive increase in government spending and complete restructure of the economy, where the factors and means of production are owned by the few as custodians of them for the many. So the point of cryptocurrencies have been it's opt out. Nation states are starting to do it, like El Salvador, and more will come. And each and every person who enters the cryptocurrency space, they're opting out in their own way. And the problem is we've never really seen this before on a global scale. And so what's happened is it's created all kinds of difficult markets where pricing things are at many times really hard to understand. For example, we have Dogecoin and the Shiba Inu stuff, and they've accumulated technically tens of billions of dollars of value, but there's no real use or utility outside of the fact that there's a social network behind them. Now, the adherents to these things would argue that these social networks themselves represent the value, and therefore that's all you need. Old school people like me say you have to have a real fundamentals, real transactions, real commerce, a potential for use and utility, a path to these things, and a view on how these things are going to work with the world, change the world. And maybe we're both right. Maybe we're both wrong. Who knows? The reality is, though, that millions of people across the United States and collectively tens to hundreds of millions across the world have entered the cryptocurrency space. And as a consequence of entering that space, negative and positive, it is changing the structure of the world economy to the extent that it's unlikely we can ever put Pandora back in the box. The box is open. All of these things have come out. People expect instantaneous liquidity. People expect trading markets that trade 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. There's a Darwinian nature to technology now. There's a lot of copying, evolving, iteration. Every year, we will see thousands of cryptocurrency related projects launching around the world without end, regardless of economic conditions. It's also created a distortion about expectations of return. And many regulatory bodies have warned people about this. But it is unrealistic if there's 100x in something to expect that to happen every single year. It just can't. Math doesn't work that way. But as a consequence of local returns, people have developed very unhealthy views on how long things should take and where value comes from. And many people are starting to subscribe to the greater idiot theory of get in fast, get out fast, and somehow you'll have this great life. And what's been missed is the fact that the system they're exiting back into is fundamentally sick and unhealthy. If we continue, the United States, because we are the world reserve currency, on this disastrous monetary policy, there is a very real possibility of a default or hyperinflation or both, dragging the entire world into the greatest depression it has ever seen. That's not hyperbole. That's not an idle threat. It's a real reality, which is why when you look at things like land purchasing, the purchase of gold, guns, ammunition, emergency storage, the exodus of capital into other assets, and the fact that magic internet money is collectively worth more than the bottom 100 economies of the world added together after just 12 years of coming out, it is a very real possibility. Okay, so that is where we are all at. Now, we can vote and we can try to build structures and try to resurrect and transform and evolve the legacy system, or we can opt out and go into the new system, or perhaps pursue a hybrid strategy. But the very definition of money, the very nature of money, the very question of should nation states be entrusted for the production of money, can they be entrusted for the production of money in a world with politics and social media and a world that's globalized? These are the real things that our industry is facing every day. Now, Cardano in particular, we built this project with the aim of a long-term outlook, decades. And we built this trying to provide a path to provide real meaningful solutions, which are fair for as many people as possible and that are open and transparent and also work. Every single category, whether it be scalability, we have things like pipelining and input endorsers and all these other optimizations that are coming quickly to enable us to scale to millions to billions of users. On the governance side, Catalyst is growing, and it's the largest decentralized organization in the world, containing over $1 billion of assets to distribute to projects. And then all those metrics are growing at a rapid rate. But if you look at a 5-year, a 10-year, a 15-year, a 20-year package, we really feel that there's a strong possibility Cardano could be the back end of many nation states. running billions of transactions on a daily basis, running national elections, being the property register of small nation states, medium-sized nation states, the backbone, the root of trust of the identity systems of the future, and the biggest preserver of human rights the world has seen. Now, I don't know what that's worth. I actually don't know how value works anymore, especially when it's in dollar denominations, because things are worth tens of billions of dollars that make no sense that they're worth tens of billion dollars. But I do believe if you have a network with billions of people using it, that network is too big to fail for humanity. And as a consequence, will be here forever, or at least until something else replaces it. And it's really hard to replace something that has billions of adherents and users. Just look at the internet. How would one build a new version of that? We've tried for 4 decades unsuccessfully. There's a stickiness about these types of network effects. So I think that people need to calm down and they need to return to first principles and take a look at the philosophy of the space and take a look at where the human race is at and understand that the avaristic pursuit of an arbitrary unit of value, whatever that might be, euros, dollars, et cetera, is not meaningful in any sense of the word. It isn't the point of the cryptocurrency industry. And that all these fair weather people that have entered in with 49ers mentalities, they're not going to do well. The point of the backbone projects like Bitcoin, like Cardano, and others in this industry, including Ethereum, are to pursue the future and try to guide humanity towards better ends for us all. That's what we're after. That's what we seek. Those are the KPIs upon which I hold myself accountable, and this community, for the most part, hold itself accountable. Those are the things I care about. And I do care about value from the perspective of providing maximum value to as many people as possible, which is why we pursue the developing world. It's why we have a B2B2C strategy and a B2G2C strategy, where we bring corporations, large companies, large governments, they bring tens of millions of people at a given time. It's why we care about a holistic approach, like having a decentralized innovation system, a decentralized brain for research. It's why we care a lot about metadata and identity and other things, because these are the things that are required to make applications useful. And the bedrock that we have laid with the research we've done, we have a clear line of sight to solving the problems that are required for a system to work at a scale of billions of people. Almost every one of our competitors just simply don't. That's a fact. And they say they do until they tell you they have to build another version of the software, or some miracle will come, or it's temporary centralization, or they have to restart the network, or these things. And they have great marketing and they have great people to convince you of such things. And then they die a slow heat death after a period of time. We know our stuff works because we wrote the proofs. We went through peer review. We took the time to do things right. Input endorsers, for example, can improve the throughput of the base ledger of Cardano by a factor of 20 to 40 in our current benchmarks we're looking at. And that came in a paper in 2016. That's how prescient the research has been and the direct line of sight it's had. And that's just one of dozens of innovations that are coming that don't even require a layer 2 solution. When you look at the power of a root of trust of Cardano, the point there is once you have it, you can use that to bootstrap high performance permission systems that have similar trust models to the underlying root of trust, which all these newfangled, amazing BFT protocols that have fast finality and many tens of thousands of transactions per second, they always have the same question. Where do you get the quorum from? And it's usually trust us. The power of Ouroboros is you get that for free, incumbent in the design of Ouroboros itself. And there's no limit to how many you can launch. It's just an economic question. These were all built into a very clever design that has been validated by years of research, patient hands, patient engineers, patient people. And we have scale now, millions of adherents in our ecosystem who aren't going anywhere. So when you bet on these things, you take a look at 5, 10, 15 years, I firmly believe the fruits of our labors will blossom and that this ecosystem's best days are ahead of it. And I don't particularly care about the ebbs and flows of the short term, because the reality is the macro at this moment in our space is deeply controlled by factors no one in the cryptocurrency space has any influence over. I had to sit down after calling senator after senator, going to our community, the broader cryptocurrency community, traveling to Washington, D.C., and watch the indignity of an infrastructure bill be passed with a poison pill for our entire industry because an 84-year-old senator who is retiring next year wanted more money for the military. And on the other side of the political aisle, people came together and didn't want to have debate because they wanted to guarantee the passage of the infrastructure bill, not caring about the consequences to a $3 trillion industry. And now we have to undo that damage, and it'll take weeks to months, and a lot of hard work, and a lot of money out of my own pocket, amongst other people in the industry, to get it done, just to undo damage that was installed for no reason at all other than to hurt our industry. That's a macro event I have no control over. No one in our industry has any control over. Not to mention all the other macro events, from China banning Bitcoin, from all kinds of economic events, to this unlimited monetary policy creating artificial distortions in the equity market, to negative interest rates, to dozens of other things that come, regulatory and otherwise. Every week, there seems to be something that comes out, positive or negative, that has some degree of influence and impact on our space. And then we have fair weather CEOs who possess enormous power who come into our space and they distort things in their own ways, from Elon Musk with Dogecoin to statements by the FANGs. And it seems like you can't do much there. So in the short term, what do? You can't do anything. You keep your nose to the grindstone and you focus on the long term, the fundamentals, the trends, the vision. Are we growing? Yes. Is the technology built on solid foundations? Yes. Do we have the right innovation process? Absolutely. Are the right processes to empower the community over time to be able to deal with any threat, regardless of what it is? Of course. Is the system getting more decentralized over time? Of course. Is the programming model amenable to a multi-paradigm computing approach, such as certified software? Yes, of course. And dozens of other areas like EVM compatibility and compatibility for mainstream developers. These are foundational capabilities. They require discipline and a calm hand, good leadership, and a lot of hard work in order for these things to exist. And once they're done, you get to the next plateau. And then that enables you to get to the next plateau and fight new adversaries like quantum computers and dozens of other things that will exist in the next 10, 20 years. They allow you to explore new markets like the metaverse, the spatial web, these things. They allow you to look at how to make DeFi real fi and get it into the hands of the billions of people who need it and make it useful for people. They also allow you to compete with monopolies and network effects. It's not lost on me that the browser and mobile computing are in some way permissioned environments. And Apple and Google and Microsoft, they have enormous say over what we see and consume. So if crypto lives in these interfaces, we have to work real hard to make sure that either we have competing interfaces or the ability to deploy despite these companies, because they're eventually going to enter our space as soon as regulatory clarity comes and inflict their 3 billion person network effect on all of us. That's another macro event I can't control, but I have to plan for, react to as a CEO in this industry. It's complicated. That's what we signed up for, because changing the world is complicated. And that's what we all want to do. At the end of the day, at the end of this technology, it has nothing to do with code and papers and software interfaces and all these terms. It's about people. That's it. And in the 21st century, we have to ask a very simple question. How should people live exiting the 21st century? So in the year 2100, when we look to that, how should people live? And do they have a higher standard of living, more freedom? And do they feel like they're in more control of their lives than when we entered the 21st century? I signed up to build a system to be part of a solution so that when we exit the 21st century, we're better off than when we entered, individually and collectively, as well as the world as a whole. I do not believe this century is going to see the survival of fiat monetary policy the way it's structured. It's mathematically impossible at this juncture for these central banks to continue doing what they're doing. Human beings have also shown an inability to restrict themselves when given absolute power, which is why we're in the position we're in. The point of blockchain technology is it acts as a social law of physics. It constrains us from ourselves. And we have shown to need this in a global economy with many existential problems. The point of projects like Cardano are to bring an all of the above approach. You bring the best engineers, the best engineering techniques and methodologies, the best scientists, the best community, and the countries that need these solutions the most all together to try to have a balanced, comprehensive approach to get these things done. And the source of value comes from the fact that that community, dedicated as it is capable at some point at solving these problems locally and globally. That's where it comes from. And those are the standards upon which we view ourselves every single day. So that's what I'm doing. And I call upon everyone to calm down, to have calm, peace. There's no rush. Value goes up, value goes down, markets go up, markets go down. Fair weather people enter and exit, and they create an enormous amount of noise. So much noise. But it never once distracts me, my company, the researchers who work with us, and the project as a whole, Cardano, from its ultimate mission and its ultimate pursuit. And it's never going to stop me from every single day shouting from the mountaintops about what fight we're really up against. The dying legacy systems of the 20th century, which are not adequate and not capable of fairly dealing with the world in its current form. And if we are to continue following them, will lead us to ruin and war and economic collapse. I would much rather have new systems that evade and avoid these realities and get us to a more peaceful state while preserving the fruits of the Enlightenment, personal freedom and liberty, privacy, the autonomy of humans, self-determination. I don't want to live in a Black Mirror dystopian world. I don't think anybody listening to this podcast, this live stream, really wants to either. And you know what? You are not passive in this. You have a choice. You, every single listener, have a choice. You can opt out, or you can stay in the legacy system and cynically complain about everything, in which case you deserve the chains on your wrists because you had the ability to put an end to it. Voting with your feet, voting with your passion, voting with your wallet, voting with your mind, voting with your beliefs, and evangelizing a better future for us all. The point of an open source project is you don't sit on your ass and wait for somebody else to build something for you. You grab a shovel and help them dig. You help them build. This is a collective monument. And what it looks like and whether it gets finished or not is as much your concern as it is mine. Now, I have resources, so of course they're committed. But those resources will eventually fade away. Hyperinflation alone will make all of you billionaires soon enough, just like it did in Zimbabwe and Venezuela. Don't for a moment believe that some elite class of people will somehow bail you out of this. Unfortunately, it's not that simple anymore. This is a collective problem caused by decades of negligence, poor policy, and kicking the can down the road. A fundamental lack of courage amongst our political class, endowed by a democratic mandate from an apathetic voting class that recused itself from its basic governance responsibilities. The only way you can solve that is to rise up and take the power back. And you do that by working, by contributing, by building, by evangelizing, by thinking, by designing, by writing code, by writing protocols, by trying to solve real problems, by decentralizing, by recognizing the perils of centralized power and not being seduced by the temptations of creating it for a local solution to a temporary problem. And you do that by being calm. You do that by being reflective, by not overreacting, by letting the passions of the moment die for a moment, and understanding that not everything is as bad as people make it out to be. And yes, there are downs, but there are also ups. And You have to remember and account for all of them together. As a final note, I'd like to thank everyone in the Cardano community because the vast majority of them seem to actually get this, which is why I honestly believe it's the strongest and best community in the cryptocurrency space. Deep down inside, each and everyone knows there's a long road ahead, take decades to truly see it through end to end. But they also know it's the single most important thing they could do because ultimately success is defined as changing the world for the better for your children, for yourself, your grandchildren, your parents, the people you care about, the environment you live within, and the governments you live under. If we succeed, the world will no longer tolerate corruption. The world will no longer tolerate hypocrisy. The world will no longer tolerate a fundamental lack of rule of law, centralization, totalitarianism, dictatorship. It will no longer tolerate people being treated differently for the color of their skin or their religious beliefs. Instead, we're all treated equally, endowed by math and protocols, and each and every one of us has equality of opportunity. Our merit will separate us, our character will separate us, but our access will not. That's what you're fighting for at the end of the day. I think that's worth a lifetime, and I think that's worth a pursuit. We're committed to this. We're not going anywhere. We're going to keep building. We're going to keep designing. We're going to keep pushing. It's a mission in that respect. And we're emboldened by the fact that there are now millions of people with us on that. So committed, they tattoo the logo on their body. So committed, they name their kids after Ada Lovelace and Cardano. So committed, a lot of them wake up as volunteers, thousands, if not tens of thousands, every single day spreading the good word. They name their hotels after the protocol. And they're here. They're lifers. Plant trees, some of which the shade they'll never know. They planted them for us. So thank you, community, for being along this road and also showing the rest of the space how to be calm. And hopefully they get the message and the lesson and they understand the significance of the work the space as a whole is doing. Cardano doesn't have a monopoly on the moral high road in this respect. The reality is there are many good people and many different projects across this industry, some of whom don't even like us and don't even care about us and think we're doomed to fail and call us a scam, who still actually believe crypto has these values and this potential for humanity. And good for them. The more the merrier. Many ships pointed in the same direction. We don't all have to be on that boat. It's okay. Thank you for listening.